So there is this video that has to do with Italians. I read the title and I was like, yeah, I mean, he's right. I never thought about it that way. So I thought that this could be an interesting video. And besides, I kind of want to help out the owner of this channel a little bit. So we're going to react. The title is Why Southern Italians Went to the US and Northerners, meaning Northern Italians, to Argentina and Brazil. And he makes a very interesting case when it comes to this. Now, the owner of the channel is called The Italian Reach. And the owner of the channel is Italian. And in fact, recently I watched this video, I liked it. So let's check him out.
The Italian-American slang word of the day is ugats. Ugats.
Italian Americans are Southern Italians adapted to the North American context.
I mean, I'm not an Italian American, I'm a Southern Italian.
Mi ricordo di quando i miei fratelli erano tosatei.
Being originally from Northern Italy, Italian Brazilians don't even eat pasta.
Oh gosh, how could you? How could you? How?
I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you hear the surnames of famous Italian Americans, such as, I don't know, Sinatra or Cuomo, which is Cuomo in Italian, or...
Yeah, Cuomo, I never heard anyone read it the other way. Do people read it the other way?
Rigitano, which is the real last name of Pope Leo, as I explained in this other video that I link in the description down below, they always sound very, very Southern Italian, because 95% of the time, these families...
Hey, put the Sicilian island in there, come on, mate.
...originally came from Southern Italy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so Southern Italian. We are very loud. We're extremely loud.
On the other end, if we look at famous Brazilians or Argentines of Italian descent, like former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro or Pope Francis Jorge Bergoglio, we find something completely different. The vast majority of these surnames originally came from the north of Italy.
You see, that's interesting because if you are not Italian, to you, all of these names sound Italian. But to us, we can tell if a surname has northern origins, central or southern. Now, interestingly enough, my surname, even though I'm as southern as it gets, because I'm from the island, still my surname is kind of central because my dad is from the north. Family originally, I believe, came from the center, from Lazio. So the name is not southern sounding. With that being said, you can still tell, like if I hear Esposito, I'm immediately thinking Naples. Whereas if I hear Rossi, I'm thinking north. And usually that's how it is.
But why is that? Why did so many Italian immigrants to North America originally came from southern Italy, while those who went to Latin America, on the contrary, were from the north?
Such an interesting question, and I never thought about it. Northern Italians went to South America. Southern Italians went to North America. What's up with that?
Today we're gonna find out, but before that, please, if you like my work and
Absolutely.
the research behind these videos, which is a lot, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button. Now let's dive in.
Give him a like, subscribe. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.
As many of my subscribers who are descendants of Italians know very, very well, between the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, Italy was characterized by an unprecedented migratory phenomenon, the so-called Italian diaspora, the story of many of you. Just between 1860, 1 year before the Italian unification, and the start of World War I in 1914, 16 million Italians emigrated and 9 of them left Italy permanently, mostly traveling to North and South America. According to another study, the numbers may have been even higher, 14 million from 1876 to 1914, and annual emigration averaged almost 220,000 in the period 1876 to 1900, and almost 650,000 from 1901 through 1915. To give you an idea of the extent of this phenomenon, it is enough to say that in the symbolic year 1900, the beginning of the 20th century, the total Italian population amounted to just over 33 million. This means that in that period between the two centuries, almost half of Italians emigrated.
That's insane.
Italian emigration was not a choice, it was a cry. A desperate answer to misery, to hunger, to the crushing weight of hopelessness. For millions of Italians, the only horizon left was the sea.
Yeah, chase the American dream, let's go.
But unlike what many foreigners, but also many Italians think, the first big wave of migration between 1876 and 1900 affected northern Italy much more than the south, traditionally considered poorer and more backward. In the 1870s
And even that tradition, it depends on the period, because in the Middle Ages it's the other way around. Like these days, yeah, Milan obviously is the center of commerce, center of trade, whatever you want. But if you look at like the kingdoms of two Sicilies, then it's the south where all the money development was. It's kind of similar to what happened in Japan as well. Now Tokyo is the center of political power and all that. But if you look at Imperial Japan, and when I say Imperial Japan, I mean Heian Jidai, not Imperial in the sense of World War II. But if you look at the Heian Jidai, and the power was in Kyoto. And so there are a lot of situations like this. Power shift usually is accompanied by a shift of wealth. And it will change, you know. You give it a few hundred years and might be the other somewhere else. Who knows? Difficult to say, really.
1880s, both the poorest regions of northeastern Italy like Veneto and Friuli, but also the richest of the northwest such as Lombardy and Piedmont were hit hard by a deep agricultural crisis.
Okay.
These areas had been traditionally dependent on small-scale farming, but new international competition, falling prices and outdated land structures pushed thousands into poverty.
Yeah.
At the same time, as I explained in these two videos that are linked in the description down below, countries like Argentina and Brazil were actively recruiting European labor to develop their agriculture and expand their economies.
Very well made, the video. I gotta give it to him. Excellent research. Where is that?
These governments were offering land, free or subsidized transport, and sometimes even cash incentives to attract settlers.
Yeah, who wouldn't do it? I mean, if you're struggling to feed your family and you've just gone through bankruptcy and then they tell you, no, I'll give you land for free and a little bit of money. Yeah, why wouldn't you? Absolutely. Absolutely.
The so-called sponsored migration, especially to northern Italians who were seen as more white, more civilized than southerners, Catholic, hardworking, and used to work in large agricultural plains that were common to both the Po Valley and the Latin American plains. Agents were sent to rural villages in Veneto, Lombardy, and Piedmont, offering free passage, contracts, and land to cultivate.
Isn't that so strange, this idea? You really see how stereotypes oftentimes are built on misunderstanding. Sometimes stereotypes are built on averages that are reflective of the truth. Again, the stereotype that we talked about when it comes to blondism of the Nordic people, when in general Germanic peoples and Celtic people, when looked at them from the point of view of classical antiquity and Mediterranean populations, definitely there is some. We shouldn't think every single one, but a high percentage of blondism is probably likely. But at the time, something like this, and once again, which is the only region in Italy that actually has a very strong influence of Nordic people at a DNA level, is Sicily. Isn't that weird? There is Germanic influence in the north of Italy for obvious reasons, but if you want to go full Nordic, it's in Sicily that you see, in fact, you see redhead, blondes, you see them in Sicily. It's so strange that then these ideas still happen.
For poor peasants devastated by the agricultural crisis, this was an offer they couldn't refuse. And that's how hundreds of thousands of northern Italians ended up in Brazil and Argentina, forming the cultural backbone of these two countries. With subsequent waves of migration, also southern Italians arrived to Latin America, but especially in the particular case of Brazil, those northern Italian cultural traits remained very strong and characterizing. And let me know in the comments if you are Latin Americans from northern Italian origin.
What's fascinating about this is that it explains why, when as a native Italian speaker, whenever I hear Spanish accents, it can be anything, it can be Spain Spanish or it can be a Latin American Spanish, the one that really sounds that is the easiest for me to understand is Argentinian Spanish. The second one is Castilian from Madrid. If I have to listen to Chilean, it starts to become difficult. Even Mexican sometimes, depending on what words they use. But when it comes to Argentinian, it is the one that I find easier to understand. And the reason has to be because there is a strong influence from Italian immigration that actually reflected in the way that people speak and the slangs, maybe more than official language. And that's one thing. The other thing is that the very beginning, when there was that guy, I think in Brazil, a Brazilian Italian, and he spoke, it didn't even sound Italian to me. It sounded like a regional Italian language from the north. The intonation, the pronunciation, the vowel systems. Likewise, instead, when you look at Italian Americans in the United States, a lot of the time in the movies, or if you, as an American, wanted to put up now, if I asked you, put on an Italian American accent, a lot of people will speak with the, Johnny, what are you doing? Come on, this is Luigi, have a seat. This is a Sicilian accent. I say as a Sicilian. No other Italian speaks like this. This is Sicilian. So oftentimes the stereotypical Italian accent that you as a Northern American have in mind is a Sicilian accent, that it's recognizable even when you're speaking English. You're like, yeah, that's a Sicilian speaking, or someone of Sicilian descent, 100%. When we are the only ones that do this.
During the second part of the Italian diaspora, which occurred at the beginning of the 20th century, emigration from southern Italy, that until then had been a minority, exploded.
Let's explode, guys.
This shift was caused by a combination of deep economic and social issues. After the unification of Italy, the South, already struggling, was hit by new taxes, land reforms that failed to help small farmers, and a general lack of industrial development. Most southern Italians were landless peasants working on large estates owned by absentee landlords with little hope of improving their condition. Meanwhile, the population was growing rapidly, putting even more pressure, and natural disasters like the 1908 earthquake in Messina and Reggio
that's in Sicily, Messina,
Calabria made things worse.
Of course.
At the same time, the most popular destinations for Italian immigrants in the late 19th century, Brazil and Argentina, had already begun putting restrictions on immigration. So when the great wave of southern Italian migration started, the doors of Latin America were closing. On the other hand, the United States was becoming a major actor on the international scene, experiencing rapid industrial growth and an enormous demand for labor. This combination of push factors in Italy and pull factors in the US drove millions of southern Italians to leave their homeland and settle primarily in North America.
You know, I love Italian Americans. I freaking love them. Whenever we visit New York with my wife, we always spend some time in Little Italy. We just love doing it. Like every time, guys. It's funny because sometimes I run into Italians, like they just recently immigrated and we have a chat, whatever. But the ones that I find fascinating are the like third generation Italian Americans. One, because sometimes I had to learn the way that they express the fact that they are Italian Americans, because it was confusing sometimes as an Italian, because usually when you have Italian Americans, and it's not just with Italian Americans, it's just a vernacular thing that you do in the United States. If you are of Italian ancestry, you say, I'm Italian. You don't say, I am of Italian origin, or you don't say, my grandfather was from Italy. You say, I'm Italian. And that's the same, like, I'm German. But you mean that your great-grandfather is German. But you were born and bred here, you don't even speak German. And to me, that was a little confusing, because if someone tells me I'm Italian, what happens, or what used to happen, is I switch. Because the moment you tell me you're Italian, I think you're like me. So you're someone who was born and bred in Italy and recently emigrated or immigrated into the United States. So I start going, veramente sei italiano? Di dove sei? And when I do that, I just said, really, you're Italian? Where are you from? Because I'm expecting him to tell me the city. So then I'm like, and then I can be like, I've been there, or my cousin is from there, or my uncle is from there, or whatever the heck. I can tell him I'm from Sicily, whatever it is. But then when I do that, and what they actually mean is that great-grandma and grandpa were from somewhere in Italy, usually the south, as he's correctly pointing out, then they don't speak Italian. And I'll get to Italian-American vernacular in a second because I've had experience with that. But then when that happens, then they're like, oh, no, I don't speak Italian. I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be impolite. So I get it, that it's just the way you guys express that. Now I know. So whenever someone tells me that, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm Italian. And then I tell them, okay, so your grandfather was Italian, really cool, like that kind of stuff. The other thing that has happened is that I remember going into this cafe in New York, Little Italy, and then there was this kid, he must have been like, I don't know, 17, and he looked Southern Italian. So as he was serving us, my wife asked him, are you Italian? And he said, yeah. And then she's like, oh, he's Italian. And so he said something in Italian-American, whatever. And what's interesting is that I understood him perfectly. But one, he wasn't actually speaking Italian, he was speaking Sicilian. And the other thing is that the choice of vocabulary, he sounded like my grandfather would. So in a way, some of the vocabulary used by Italian Americans is old sounding to me. But the fact that it's coming from the mouth of a 17-year-old creates an interesting frozen in time feeling that I loved. I thought it was fascinating.
And this is the story of many of you guys who are watching this video. I can see your last names in the comments. Italy is one of the highest varieties of surnames in the world, with a huge difference between north and south, and every little village has its own typical, and it's very easy for me to spot where you guys were originally from.
Absolutely.
Campania, Sicily, Abruzzo, Calabria, Puglia. Your families were almost exclusively from southern Italy. According to most studies, about 4 million Italians arrived at Ellis Island between 1900 and 1920.
That's a lot of Italians.
Year, the United States adopted an open immigration policy before strong restrictions took place. And looking at the records in the Ellis Island archive, including those of my descendants, it is striking to notice that 95% of the surnames come from the former Bourbon Kingdom, from southern Italy in short, and a very similar story involved Canada. There too, even if with different timing and figures, Italian immigration was almost exclusively from the south, from Calabria in particular.
Really?
And in my family there are also...
Calabria is actually the one place, if you like spicy food, Calabria is the place where you're going to find a lot of spice and hot food within Italian cuisine. They're kind of famous for it.
A family, there are also some Toronto Italians originally from Calabria that I'm trying to contact through social media. And if you are interested in the history of the Italian immigration to Canada as I am, please check out this video that I link in the description down below.
Cool.
But immigration from southern Italy to North America presented two fundamental differences.
Look how they're dressed. I love the mustache, by the way.
Is compared to that from northern Italy to Latin America. The first is represented by the fact that while Venetians, Piedmontese and Lombards who went to Argentina and Brazil, especially at the beginning, became farmers and often owners of vast arable lands, the Italians who went to North America were employed almost exclusively and in very difficult working conditions as unskilled workers in the factories of the large cities on the Atlantic coast. The only partial exception to this rule was that of the Italians in California, and if you're interested in this story, please
video
check
below.
out this other video.
Yeah.
Another huge difference between Italian immigration to North and South America was represented by the integration within the host countries. The northern Italians who went to Latin America generally integrated very well. As mentioned, they were perceived as white, they were Catholics and speakers of Roman languages and dialects similar to Spanish and Portuguese. It was a very peaceful process overall. For southern Italian immigrants to North America, as your grandfathers and great-grandfathers know very, very well, the story was unfortunately very different. Into North America was extremely difficult. Generally darker-skinned, Catholic, speaking dialects of Italian that were the antithesis of English. For many decades, southern Italians were not even considered white by the Anglo-Saxon majority and were subjected to very serious racial discrimination, including lynching and other types of physical aggression. And even today that the situation has improved dramatically, this enormous difficulty in integrating into the North American mainstream has left Italian-American communities with a strong sense of another identity, of diversity, of distinct Southern Italian heritage. As an Italian, when I speak to Italian Americans or Italian Canadians, when I observe them, I still see very strongly those
Yes.
Southern Italian traits.
He's absolutely
Italian
right.
Americans are Southern Italians adapted to the North American
He's right.
context, but those influences are definitely still there in the food, in the way, like I do, of gesturing with their hands, in the way of dressing, in
Yes.
the incredible influence of Southern Italian dialects into Italian American slang.
I turn
He's
to
right.
him and say, Pop, ma che fai? American.
On the contrary, when I see, for example, a Brazilian of Italian
Yeah, that was a southerner. 1,000%. 1,000% that's a southern.
Venetian origin, I observe completely different things. He's still Italian, but in a very, very different way. For example, he doesn't do any hand gestures. When he speaks a dialect derivating from Venetian called Talian, which would be completely incomprehensible to Italian Americans. He doesn't even eat pasta, the symbol of Italian Americans, because his ancestors back in the day exclusively ate rice and polenta. And it's also visually
Polenta, for those who don't know, is a typical northern Italian food that it's based, kind of derived from sweet corn. Very typical northern Italian dish, and it doesn't exist in the south. Like, you can find it just because you feel like special that day, but no one eats it down south. So, but in the north, absolutely, every time I visit. Okay, cool. I really loved it. I actually ended up watching the entire thing, even though I wasn't planning to. Once again, great channel. I'm really sorry that this guy had to go through all the trouble that he has had with the health of his family and whatnot. So I hope that once this video gets edited and posted as its own, then he gets a little boost. And all right, so that's another thing that we did today.